Welcome to The Real News. I'm Eddie Conway. I'm here today to try to get an update on the relationships between the United States and Cuba. And so I have with me Dr. Morgan and Comrade Montero. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you very much.
First, I probably want to ask you to kind of like give us a little background on Cuba for the audience that don't know, and what happened with Obama relaxing the sanctions, and what happened after that with Trump reimposing it. And it's a big question, but where are we now?
Well, the big issue during the Obama's time was that it was broken, a kind of isolation, information isolation. That information that you can get only knowing people, when you talk with people. And during the Obama times, even as being maintained the restrictions for a very open visiting to Cuba by Americans, because they were maintained all the time. But the Obama times meant to open the opportunities for Americans to come and to realize what is truly Cuba. Because for most Americans, most common Americans, Cuba is a small country, mostly perhaps an enemy to the south. And the information about how Cubans are, that by the way are very similar to Americans, but the information about how we live and what problems we have and what advantages we have was practically denied by media, by big media. To big media normally were focusing in problems, and some of them minor problems, existing some of them minor problems. And the Obama times meant to allow Americans to come and to talk with Cubans, getting the shades and the lights of the country. But even getting shades is a good thing for Cuba, because you can bring to a normal person the idea that we are a country fighting for survival, fighting for having a better life, and fighting to maintain the advantages we got after the revolution. Because after the revolution, many Cubans became much more free. Cubans, some layers of the Cuban society that were essentially oppressed or were essentially non-recognized before the revolution, they became recognized. They became part of the normal life in the country. And for example, the black layer of the population. And the advantages we got, that the universal health care, free universal health care, the free universal education for Cubans, probably one of the best in Latin America, if not the best. And of course, they are among our goods. And of course, an American coming there and talking with people could also have debates. But debates were very different to debates normally told here. And it was a very big advantage. About 1.5 million of Americans came, and for the first time was broken that barrier of misinformation that occurred there. And of course, when the administration changed, the first action was to cut that. Because if you maintain that kind of normal flux of persons exchanging and telling the truth about what happens there, you cannot maintain the lies. And the first action, on behalf of apparently not giving money to the Cuban government, because it was the official reason, was to cut the opportunities to Americans to come. And to cut the opportunities to Cuban American families to be together with the Cuban family, with their counterparts. It was another very important point, to divide the families. And of course, that actions have been a reason for suffering for Cubans, reason for, I think, for losing, also for Americans, because for a possible cooperation in science, my field is science, I'm a scientist, a possible cooperation in science between our countries could be excellent for both countries, not only for Cuba, but also for USA, because we're neighbors. We cannot avoid to be very near and to share waters and to share environment and to share many things, even to share ethnicities, and even to share uses, even to share a lot of things.
Okay, so Dr. Morgan, from an American standpoint, how do you see the relaxing of the travel restrictions under Obama, the reimposition of them under Trump, and how does that impact Americans now in terms of their information and ability to travel back and forth?
Well, certainly under President Obama, there was an opening, a very small opening in reference to positive relationships. At the same time, we have to remember that the embargo remained, or blockade, as many of us call it, that being in Guantanamo remained, and there was still a number of travel restrictions, although they were opened. So there was a small window of opportunity, and also President Obama was doing it certainly for the reasons that that would enable Cuba to, in quote, change its perspective in its worldview. So that was certainly a part of it all, but it certainly was a step in the right direction. Now with the restrictions, obviously, U.S. politics have a lot to do with it, even though certain things remain with the blockade and the occupying Guantanamo and the travel restrictions. They've just tightened. So, in a general way, I think that Obama and Trump were the same in reference to the blockade and Guantanamo. However, Obama certainly had an opening. And this is not from my opinion, basically. It is from the president at the time, Raul Castro, who talked about in Granma, a newspaper that one could get Cuban program things about events and things about Cuba, and he said what basically I paraphrased in reference to the Obama opening.
Mm-hmm. Montero, there's been recently a lot of talk about the Cubans' medical program, doctors around the world, et cetera, et cetera. This goes all the way back to the beginning, I believe, of the revolution. Can you talk a little bit about this program?
One of the most marvelous things have been doing Cuba, even during the times where we had not too much physicians. We had at the beginning of the revolution there in Cuba, there were 6,000 physicians. 3,000 of them emigrated, mostly to here. And Cuba remained with whole population near to 7 million people with 3,000 physicians. The Cuban government made a very, very strong effort to increase the number of physicians and to improve the health of Cuban people. Even in that times, there were needs of physicians for particular situations in Africa. And Cuba sent some dozens of physicians there for supporting that people. I think that the programs of Cuba for helping foreign countries in the field of public health is very old in time. The conditions people are going are always on the will of the people. The people not wanting to go, they are not going. If I'm contracted with you for something, I am giving you something, and you are giving me something. And if you accept, we agree. If you are do not accept, we are not agreeing, and you are not going. That's the way. And people there, and the Cuban physicians are going in the conditions, I'm not familiar with them, but the conditions they accept to go. And practically 99% of people that goes and return. Some of them remain there because any reason they want to have their own family, things like that. But suddenly, this administration converted that action as a slavery. It's something that it's hard to believe. They are able to encourage governments in certain countries to abandon the cooperation in Cuba with Cuba in terms of that. Let me tell you, Cuba have been maintaining the supplies of energy we need, because we are not producing all the energy we can produce. We need to use, thanks to that medical cooperation. We are sending physicians to Venezuela, and they pay with oil. That's a trade. That's a trade. By the way, a very humanitarian trade, because in exchange of that oil that is to be born in the factory, we are giving health to poor people, to people who had I read sometime, I'm not sure about the exact figure, that when Hugo Chavez came to Venezuela as a president, there were a population around 26 million people there. Only 5 million had access to regular public health. And Cubans began to help that country, being the richest country in South America, to access public health to that very majority of the population that had not regular access to public health. And I think that it was a wonderful thing. How you can criticize that? The condition people going there, they accept that. It's absolutely by their will. The ones didn't want to go, they remain in Cuba working their field, or they even fly to other places. We are having also physicians in many other countries by themselves, getting even much more money than they get there.
You know, the infant mortality rate in Cuba is supposed to be the lowest in the two continents of the Americas.
Absolutely.
And that's because of their medical advancement.
It's a whole policy. Mm-hmm. It's the whole policy. Perhaps if you mention a very updated advance in medicine existing here in the best clinics of USA, perhaps that advance is not in Cuba. But to sustain the life of a whole population, you must have a comprehensive policy. And the comprehensive policy includes not only having the best and up-to-date advance in medicine, it's also having the possibility of you to give care to those people that are not normally getting care from the very scientific point of view, if they are not having that system of public health. Every Cuban has a physician near to his door. And I think that is a very positive action. And you are sure that if you have a problem, you have a lot of choices. If I have a problem in the knee, I can go even to the family doctor, I can go to the polyclinic, I can go to the hospital, I can get even the attention of one of the best physicians in Cuba in that direction if I go to the hospital where that people is working. I mean, it's for paying nothing. I get that attention paying nothing and freely. Of course, perhaps the glamour of the hospitals are not the same as you can find here, but it's for all people. And you see there people from all layers in the society, from all even you can see there people who are not agreeing with the society, agreeing with this, but they are receiving that service. I think that it's a magnificent action, one of the most human actions of the revolution, and normally it's neglected.
Some of the most current things people might remember, the Ebola attacks.
Absolutely.
There was never any mention of Cubans' initial involvement with that.
Cooperation with USA in that direction.
Exactly.
Cuba and USA cooperate in that direction.
And so
it was recognized by President Obama.
There we go. So and even presently they've been interacting with the Chinese over this other disease, the
coronavirus. Yeah. And I did want to point out something because I watched it with my own eye. When Katrina happened and a tremendous amount of black people got trapped in New Orleans because of white racism.
Very sad situation.
Cuban offered to help, sent people and they were refused.
Fidel Castro prepared a brigade of physicians coming to support that, and it was named after Henry Reeves. Henry Reeves was a fighter for Cuban freedom in the 19th century, an American fighter for Cuban freedom in the 19th. And that brigade was named at that time as Henry Reeves, and was told to the U.S. government to accept that brigade to help working to support that poor people in New Orleans, but they were not allowed. The Cuban government, the American government didn't accept that support. The brigade still exists. We are sending that brigade everywhere where there are problems. In Pakistan, South Africa, everywhere.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Why do you think there's such Cuba is a small island, 90 miles away, 10 million people. Well, why do you think there's such hostility from the American government toward Cuba?
Right. The bottom line is that Cuba represents exactly the opposite of what the system, economic and social system of the United States of America. And by the birth rates that you mentioned, by the medical issues, by not having, having profits, not having profits, et cetera, all are part of all of these kinds of things. To U.S. rulers, not to the people of the U.S., that to the U.S. rulers, that's an anathema because of these particular issues. And that's why they go through these different cycles from being kinder and gentler, with the exception of the blockade and the exception of not getting out of Guantanamo. Can you imagine the fact that there would be another country in your another country that possesses land here in Baltimore, let's say, for example? Well, that's the same thing with Guantanamo. Big issue.
In the interest of time, you have the final statement. Is it anything you'd like to share with the American public about
what I
Cuba
want to tell you is
what?
that the best for both countries is to exchange. The best for both countries is to communicate about the truth, not the invented truth. The truth is the truth. You cannot show. We cannot show a paradise. We can show a place where people could live even much more happy if they could not be blockaded by the most powerful economy in the world. And we can share a lot of things, even contributing in a certain way to more happiness for the American people. We can perhaps provide some solutions that could be easily managed here, not changing the system. Cubans are not wanting to change anything in this country. That's a matter of the Americans. Changing things here is a matter of Americans, as changing things in Cuba is a matter of Cubans. That means it must be a basis of respect. But imitating some things from America could be useful for us. Imitating some things from Cuba could be useful for you. Why not? Why prejudice are going above that thing? Why magnifying problems? We have problems. Yes, we have problems. But of course, if you only, Jose Marti was a very clever person, was a leader of the Cuban independence in the 19th century. And he had a very nice statement in one of the stories told to every Cuban boy or girl when they come to school. The sun has light and shades. The grateful people only speak about light, and the ungrateful people only mention shades. And that thing, please go to Cuba, see Cuba, exchange with Cubans, look at them. Look at our work, look at our life. Leave the blockade, let us do things perhaps for good. Probably we can do it much more better. We could do it much more better, not biased by the permanent menace to be under siege by the most powerful economy in the world. A Cuban cannot even. I was in China some months ago, and I learned about the Cuban who wanted to go to a bank in China, to get some dollars in exchange, and he was denied because a Cuban cannot get a dollar. It's forbidden to. If a Cuban is living in Cuba, he can only by special permission. I am here getting dollars because I am on the special permission of a special visa here. But that's crazy things. That's very crazy things. We're talking about a bill. We're talking nothing more important.
The most current way to go to Cuba now, well, not the current way, but the next thing that's happening is something called the Mayday Brigade. And the Mayday Brigade is very historical in reference to the Cuban Revolution. There are over millions of people, literally, I've been there, millions of people who on May Day assemble, and the people who are in the parade are mostly working people, Cuban working people, some others from other countries in the Caribbean, et cetera. And so it's really important to be able to do that. And that's what the organization that I belong to, the DC Metro Coalition in solidarity with the Cuban Revolution, is saying that, see for yourself. Just like Malcolm X said, see for yourself, listen for yourself, and think for yourself. And speaking of Malcolm X, certainly the first time that I can recall this situation was when Malcolm helped to provide the accommodations at the Teresa Hotel for the Cuban delegation that nobody else would accept. Since that time, there's been the whole business with the apartheid with South Africa, the kinds of assistance that they received, that
Angola.
Cubans received from not just Angola, but the Belgian Congo and Patrice Lumumba, all of these kind of folks. That there's a history to be said. One other thing, there's a medical program as well, where you, as a student, you can apply to Cuba. Cuba has an international, I think it's over 20,000 over the years have been doctors. And so
500 each year from America. From the United States.
From the U.S.
Yeah.
And IFCO, I believe, Gail Walker is handling those particular kinds of things now. The second thing is that on March, at Fordham University Law School in New York City, March 20th to 22nd, there's an international conference in support and in solidarity with Cuba. And so that's going to be if you can't go to Cuba, then,
go to New York.
Go to New York.
Okay, that's the final word. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you very much for inviting me in that direction, and I hope that it could be managed and heard and thought.
Okay.
He mentioned that.
And thank you for joining the Real News.